Yes. My precious. Hi. Welcome to another episode of Rank the Movies. Yes. So, I've been watching movies I don't like, and I've been giving them another opportunity at showing me that I can actually like them. We've covered everything else, and I burned them in the fire, and from the fire, I was returned a present. Which has gotten me to rewatch the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, I'm not going to do the entire trilogy in one video. Instead, I'm going to do each movie individually. I have been watching the extended cuts of them all. So obviously, week one, we are starting with The Fellowship of the Ring. And if you can make out that this is a black case, no, this is not a 4K copy. It just happens that the extended editions on Blu-ray have black cases. Sorry about that. Also, a funny thing I found while looking for various VHS tapes, because obviously I'm a collector, I actually did find the extended version of this movie on VHS. So that's kind of weird. I haven't found the other two. I know they're available, but they're harder to find because, well, they came out later in the VHS tapes run. So they're just harder to find. So we are starting with Fellowship of the Ring, the first part, and this is the extended edition. So if I'm talking about something, you have no idea what I'm talking about because you didn't see it in the theatrical version. That is simply because, well, I'm watching the extended. I'm just gonna put this on. I think this will look good on me. I think this is the type of jewelry one needs to wear. All right, there we go. Now it's close. Precious is close. All right. So let's dive into it. These are actually some of the hardest movies I've had to review. Not because I don't have opinions or thoughts on them, or because of their length. It's just because it's not a coherent story. All three movies form a coherent story. So what you get here is 4 hours to, well, 3.5 hours to a cliffhanger that's supposed to make you want to watch The Two Towers. Overall, I guess I'll start off with my overall opinion of the movie. When I first watched it way back in 2001 when it came out, I didn't care for it. Actually, it put me to sleep. I fell asleep watching Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah, when they were in the mines of Moria, I fell asleep. And I woke up like 10-15 minutes later, and I never rewound it. I just kept going. And it never really grabbed my attention, as it should have. Watching it this time around, I'm also watching these with my roommate, because he likes the Lord of the Rings movies, and he also has no problem with my opinion being made as these movies are going on. So I think watching it with him, and also now being, we're talking 20 years. So I went from being a 14-year-old kid to being a 34-year-old adult. Unlike everything else I've watched, so if you go back over the last 5 weeks, you'll see everything else I've talked about that I didn't care for, and I still don't care for it. I basically ripped all those movies apart. Fast forward now, and I gotta admit, Lord of the Rings is better than, at least The Fellowship is better than I initially thought. As of the recording of this video, I haven't watched Two Towers yet, or rewatched Return of the King. I'm gonna get to those later today, actually, with one of them, and then tomorrow with the other. So as far as Fellowship of the Ring goes, it was a much better viewing experience than when I watched it by myself when I was 14. With that, was it a great movie that's gonna, rock my top 100 and make it onto it and be something I really want to rewatch over and over again? No, I can probably go another 20 years before I watch this movie. Which is good, because everything else I've reviewed that I've rewatched, I never want to watch those movies again, unless it's San Andreas, just to make fun of it with friends. I'll make that, I will watch San Andreas again to make fun of with friends, because that movie begs to be made fun of. But yeah, I can go another 20 years without watching The Lord of the Rings, at least The Fellowship, and I feel like Return of the King's really got to hit me hard. Like, I got to have a huge, like, uptick to go, oh, I guess all three of them are, because that's how this trilogy needs to work, is when you get to Return of the King, it's got to make you want to watch the other two. But we're focusing strictly on Fellowship today with this review. Next week we got Two Towers, and then we finally get to Return of the King. So my thoughts on Fellowship of the Rings. Fellowship of the Ring. I felt like, and I made this statement multiple times. Now, I was aware, because of the animated version of The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and Return of the King, back from the 70s and 80s, or 80s and early 90s, I can't remember the time frame there. So I know the story, and I know, the bits and pieces that fit together, and I feel like they left in way too much, and this could be the extended cut again. I feel like they left in way too many winks and nods to The Hobbit without ever actually saying that it's, that it's its own story. Because he made these movies first, and then came back and made The Hobbit, I feel like you have a lot of references to The Hobbit that are just, if you're not familiar with the material, if you're not familiar with the books or the older versions of the films, they're just meaningless references. And they're being dropped. Does that make this? Does it take away from this movie? No. Because again, they're fine meaningless references. I just think there's way too many of them. Because before they leave the Shire, and there are some after they leave the Shire that are a little more cryptic and a little more, you caught it. Which is fine. Those ones are fine. But in the Shire, there is like 4 or 5 direct references to The Hobbit and that adventure that is never like lightened upon because it's its own story. So they weren't going to like dive deep into that story because they probably wanted to make it. Do I think it should have been 3 movies long? I haven't watched it. I'm just gonna assume that the 300-page book does not require 3 movies to tell its story accurately. I'm just making that assumption. Like I said, I've never seen the Hobbit movies outside of the original animated one, which is pretty good. It was actually my favorite out of all 3 of those old school animated ones that they put out way back in the day when I was just a little kid or before I was born, either or. The Hobbit was my favorite, so I do like the story of the Hobbit. I think it's a really interesting story. And this one, again, I was more invested in the story this time around, just because it held my attention a little more. Again, it could be because I'm older, it could be because I was watching it with someone. Either one of these are perfectly acceptable answers. It was a fine movie. Again, I just would have liked a little less, and again, it could be the extended cut, the winks and nods to The Hobbit, without ever explaining it, especially like in the beginning where you see Bilbo get the ring, which is from The Hobbit. He got the ring from Gollum in The Hobbit, and it's just really glossed over. And I stifled myself from making a joke about, that doesn't look like Martin Freeman, who would go on to play Bilbo in The Hobbit, in that scene, but I didn't, and like literally 10 minutes later, my roommate was surprised I didn't make that joke. So, that is what it is. It was an entertaining movie. It had its points where you could engage a little into humor. Because I had been so long since I've seen the movie, I actually had some very well-timed jokes. Like when the Nazgul is looking for the hobbits, and he's like looking, and he's looking, and then he starts sniffing. As he was looking, before he started sniffing, I started making jokes that he couldn't smell, that he didn't know what hobbits smelled like, so he couldn't just smell out the hobbits from where they were, and then he started sniffing. So, that was a great moment. That was a very well-timed moment from someone who had no idea it was coming. But yeah, overall it was a decent movie. I was shocked that there's a half an hour of end credits on this thing. The extended cut has a half an hour of end credits by itself. It is a 4-hour movie, but it's actually only 3.5 because there's so much end credits. There's a lot. There is just a lot of end credits. But yeah, overall, Fellowship of the Ring, it's not as bad as I remember it. I still don't think it is like the greatest thing on earth, but it's a decent movie. I get why people enjoy it. It tells a good story. I'm interested to get into Two Towers because I feel like the middle part is always the hardest one to get right. And it's also, oddly enough, out of all three of these movies, even though I fell asleep during Fellowship, it is the one I remember the least. I just do. I just remember that story the least. But that is, of course, next week's problem. Next week's problem is me talking about the Two Towers. This week, we're talking about Fellowship. I think I've covered everything I wanted to. I think I was talking with my roommate, and we realized there's some weird, like, things with the cast. Not that they're cast poorly. They're all cast very well. It's just that most of them, like, had big careers. Like, their careers boomed because of this movie. And I'm not talking about, like, Ian McKellen and Christopher Lee and Hugo Weaving and, I can't think of his name. He plays Bilbo. And his name is just Ian Holmes. I'm not talking about them because they already had careers. They were already very well-established stars. But it's the rest of them. Like Orlando Bloom, he did Pirates of the Caribbean, and poof, that was basically the end of his career. Viggo Mortensen was always a hit-or-miss star throughout his career, and he still kind of is. Sean Bean is a meme now, basically, because he dies. But, like, he still, like, you could claim Game of Thrones, but he still dies in the first season. The only one that I really like, just because of how well his career went, Liv Taylor kind of did the same thing. Sean Astin still does enough. Like, he still pops up. Like, he understood what he needed to do to stay relevant, and he did it. John Rhys Davies? Okay, John Rhys Davies, I'm pretty sure he plays. That makes sense. That's why I couldn't place that actor. Damn, he did a good job. But yeah, I'm not going to harp on the cast. Again, I thought they all did very good jobs. It was very well acted. It's a decent story. Again, because it's the first part of a story, it's hard to fully, like, grasp everything in a review because, you know, it just ends. It ends with Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn going off to save the hobbits in Isengard because the hobbits were taken to Isengard. So they're going off, and you've got... It's basically that splinter of the adventure. We're going into three separate paths because we've got those guys going after the hobbits. We've got Sam and Frodo trying to destroy Precious in the Mountains of Doom, which is very bad. They're villains. How dare they? How dare they? How dare they? How dare that villainous hobbitess try to burn Precious in the fires of Mount Doom? How dare he? He's a villain! I hope he dies. I hope he dies a painful death. Precious. Alright, and then you still got Gandalf because this is a rewatch, you know Gandalf comes back, so you still know there's still more to that story as well. So there isn't a movie that has conclusions. It's just a movie that has a lot of stuff going on, and hopefully when you get to the next one, you remember everything. Because there are going to be characters shot at you, and references and everything, that if you don't remember, like, because these movies came out 1 year apart from each other. So if you didn't rewatch Fellowship before you went to that theater to see Two Towers, there might have been stuff that went over your head. Just because it is going to reference back to Fellowship and that movie and that story that's already started, because it is the start of that story. I do find how funny that Fellowship, like, it crumbles quick. Like, the Fellowship is formed, all the Blu-rays are 2 discs, which is, I mean, it's a good quality transfer, I get it, but yeah, each movie is 2 discs. And this is 1 VHS tape. I'm gonna point that out. This is, the original cut of the film is 1 VHS tape. The extended is 2 VHS tapes. I would hate to see, like, I feel like Return of the King's extended almost has to be 3, but I know it's not. But I feel like it should be, because the regular cut is 2. But anyways, so they're each 2 Blu-rays, and the Fellowship is formed at the end of the first disc. So the Fellowship literally lasts the hour and a half on the second disc that's actually movie. Woo! Great Fellowship, guys! Yeah! I know. Technically it continues on, it's just now broken into its groups. And, oh yeah, I forgot there's another path. There is the path that actual Merry and Pippin are on as well, as they're being taken, as the hobbits are being taken to Isengard. I've made that reference twice now. I feel bad for myself because I've made that reference twice now. Again, overall, I like it better than I did 20 years ago. So that's good. This is also the longest gap from initial viewing to this review that I've been doing with all of these movies, because Chronicle was only maybe less than a decade on Chronicle. San Andreas Savages, Movie 43, and All About Eve. Those are all less than a decade. This is 20 years, and then 19 years, and then 18 years, because again, they came out 1 year apart. I did watch them all when they came out. I believe these are the actual VHS copies I watched 20 years ago, and, I think these are. I could be wrong. Fellowship might have been a rental. I might have rented Fellowship, but The Two Towers and The Return of the King, those are the actual VHS copies I watched. I didn't keep them. I just found them in some stuff. So, anyways, this is Martin Prevost. This is Rank the Movies. Like, comment, and subscribe to make sure you see the next episode. Well, subscribe to make sure you see me talking about the ramble about The Two Towers. Like, if you want to make sure. Like, if you like what I've said. Leave a comment if you got something to say. I didn't really dig in negatively into this movie, only because I wasn't that pissed off or annoyed by anything. I thought some of the CG was really funny, just because it didn't age well. There was some really poor, like, when Gandalf is flying, I had to rewind it, when Gandalf is flying away on the bird from Isengard. That's just the awful CG Gandalf face they put on his stunt double. It is hilarious. It is so bad. It looks like bad, like, Windows Paint, Microsoft Paint, or, like, really, really early, I can't think of the other program I'm trying to think of. But yeah, it just looks really bad. It looks so bad. And also, me and my roommate got a kick out of the book In the Mines of Moria, that it looks like it's from Monty Python, because it looks like the person was being killed and kept writing. So it looks like that moment from Holy Grail where they're writing the text, like, "Arrgh!" because they were being murdered. So there are good parts of this movie. There are bad parts, but there's no infuriating parts. I didn't get infuriated at this movie because it is a fantasy film, and there's a lot more leeway in fantasy than movies that are supposed to be set in reality. So again, tune in next week for my review of The Two Towers. I will see you then. Have a great one. And remember, be good to each other. See you next time.